Hello, everyone, and welcome to this neighborhood dialogue session for the Hearth Village in Campbell River. My name is Pam Ryan, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. As we start, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that the project and most of the participants here today and the topic that we're discussing is in the unceded traditional territory of the Likwata people, including the Wiwaikai and the Wiwakam First Nations. Just a bit about who we are. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here to provide this important information about the project, to hear comments and provide answers to those questions. I do thank you for taking the time to join us. And I'm very happy now to introduce the presenters who are representing the partners that are involved in this project who will be presenting today. I ask each of them to unmute their mic and say hello so that you can put a face to a name. From Campbell River, we have Elle Brovold, who is the city manager. Elle?
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Elle. And from BC Housing, we have Jennifer Fox, who is the regional director for the Vancouver Island region. Jennifer?
Hi there. Good to be here today for the conversation.
And also Albert Lopez, senior manager of regional development services.
Hi.
We also have others from BC Housing. You might see Emily just here taking notes and being part of the technical team. So thanks, Emily. To start the session, we're just going to be going over quickly the guiding principles for the time that we have together today. This is really designed to ensure that we have a successful session. And so I just want to draw your attention to the slide information here. The commitment from the partners is to come together in the spirit of community, to share information openly and transparently, and to work to balance the time for sharing information and answering questions. So we'll try and move through our presentation as quickly as possible. We ask that all participants in today's session use respectful language, people first language. For example, you will hear us referring to people experiencing homelessness. We also ask you to be brief and genuine with your questions to allow space for the answers and the dialogue that might create. And lastly, please to consider that there may be people joining who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness. And we just ask everyone to be mindful of lived experiences on this call. Now, one more housekeeping slide, and that is you are currently in listen-only mode. When the time comes for discussion portion of the session, we will unmute you and then you'll be able to raise your hand and unmute yourself as you want to ask your questions. In the meantime, you can also use the chat function to communicate with myself or with the meeting host. That doesn't allow dialogue between participants just because we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to focus. During the discussion, we encourage people to raise your hand and ask that question. You can also, as I mentioned, use the Q&A window if you'd like to type your questions in, and we'll just read those aloud. This last slide for me is just a quick agenda. We'll have an overview on homelessness and housing in the City of Campbell River. We will provide some details on what a shelter as a gateway to housing is. And then we'll provide information about the Hearth Village project in Campbell River, the information on community safety, and then finally we'll work to keep things moving and to reserve as much as possible for question and answer. We've got about half an hour scheduled for that after the presentation. And with that, I will turn things over to Elle and advance the slide so you can start.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks for joining. I'm here on behalf representing the city and of course, mayor and council. And homelessness and housing in general isn't a new topic to Campbell River, unfortunately. We've heard more and more from the community the last couple of years about the impacts of homelessness and housing and calls upon the city to help respond to the challenge. So we do a point in time count to look at what the numbers related to those experiencing homelessness look like. The last point in time count saw 197 people facing or experiencing homelessness, which was a pretty significant increase from 2021. It was up 66%. So of those, we know that 57% of those individuals are unsheltered, which means they're either outside, sleeping in a vehicle, or sleeping at someone else's place. So the need is significant and increasing.
Thanks for that information, Elle. So based on that, people in Campbell River are experiencing or at risk of homelessness, and that creates health and safety challenges. People experiencing homelessness are not all the same. They can be young people, seniors, people with physical or mental disabilities. They may have experienced trauma, poverty, or struggled with just the high cost of housing. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Homeless Encampment Action Response Temporary Housing Program, which is what the HEARTH acronym stands for, is being used by the province to form partnerships and invest in actions to address homelessness and encampments. BC Housing and the City of Campbell River are partnering through this program to build approximately 40 units of temporary housing at 1299 Homewood Road. This project and others like it ensure that people who are at risk of homelessness or facing homelessness are able to access suitable housing and supports. The Hearth Village will have individual units for people to sleep and store their belongings, as well as a shared amenity space and washroom. The project was announced on February 15th, and we are currently conducting community engagements. The next steps include site work and construction on the project. So now I'll pass it along to Jennifer Fox from BC Housing to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Albert. As illustrated in this infographic, the gateway into housing is through shelter. And so with previous temporary supportive housing sites, BC Housing has moved folks currently in encampment directly into temporary supportive housing. And what we've learned through that is having the emergency shelter as a gateway into housing provides space to assess and support folks coming from encampment to shelter to determine how best to meet their needs and in what housing option best appropriate. So as illustrated here, there is the coordinated access and assessment process, which is where vulnerability assessment tools are done to assess folks to determine their needs. And from there, moving to shelter is illustrated here. You can see some of the shelters that are listed in Campbell River. Then for the Hearth to temporary supportive housing, it's reaching out to shelter providers through coordinated access and assessment to ask them to identify folks staying in shelter who are ready to move on to temporary supportive housing. And so those folks would then move into the Hearth temporary housing, and eventually, after having their support needs assessed fully, move into permanent supportive housing, as illustrated on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The Hearth Village residents, this is for all genders, 19 and plus, who are residents of Campbell River, who have been staying in an emergency shelter and are ready to transition into temporary supportive housing, the Hearth site. They'll be offered spaces based on their individual needs and the supports that are available at the village. There's more shelter beds that will become open for people who are currently sheltering outdoors. And so it really is that sort of the continuum along the housing path. And so encampment folks would typically move into the emergency shelter, and then the shelter would move into the Hearth site. The infographic here illustrates the coordinated access and assessment approach, which includes having community partners, nonprofit operators, BC Housing, Island Health, the city, and Indigenous groups coming together at a table to identify what vacancies and what housing is currently available, and who do we have on our list who needs housing. And so having those conversations together to match folks up to appropriate housing. Thank you.
Thanks. So when we actually look at the need, and for those people experiencing homelessness in Campbell River, there are people that have typically been local to the area for a long time. So of the individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness, 65% of them have been in the community for more than 5 years, and 22% have always been in our community. Of those individuals, 24% of them have been homeless for under 6 months, and 68% of them have been homeless for a year or more. So the intent of this is to set up this transitional housing to meet the needs of the local population. It's to alleviate some of the existing challenges in our community, and it allows us to partner with BC Housing to provide safer options immediately while we continue to work together for longer-term permanent housing solutions.
So in addition to the 40 secure sleeping units, the village is anticipated to include shared dining and amenity spaces, individual sleeping units with locked doors, bathrooms, and is being planned on a site that is close to community services. Next slide, please. Once assigned to a unit, residents will be able to stay here for longer durations, provided that they follow the requirements laid out in their program agreements. Residents will have a mailing address, a locking door, and a place to securely store their belongings. Data indicates that once housed, people at risk show improvements in health, self-care, independence, along with other personal benefits. Supports and services at the village may include peer support, skills training, and assistance with navigating the housing system. On-site service providers will also have space for counseling or medical treatments. Staff will be trained in nonviolent crisis intervention, overdose, and incident responses. On-site services providers will also be providing peer support, connecting residents with local resources, and providing trauma-informed communications.
So the site selected in this instance is at 1299 Homewood Road. The site was chosen for temporary housing because it's available immediately, it is owned by the city, and it's currently already in use for overnight sheltering. It's also close to community services. The temporary housing can be built and occupied quickly, and as part of a broader plan to find housing solutions that will help reduce homelessness in Campbell River while this permanent housing is being built. It's hoped that the Hearth Village will take the pressure off existing service providers in the downtown and reduce the challenges being experienced by area businesses and residents. As it relates to resident and community safety, BC Housing and the city are certainly committed to being good neighbors. The safety and security of the residents, staff, and the surrounding community is a priority. If there are concerns or problems with specific individuals on the property, the operator will be able to work with the individual, the police, to find solutions. BC Housing will be providing a contact list of key contacts to reach out should any issues arise, and that will be available to the immediate area. The Hearth Village residents will also have the opportunity to volunteer on cleanup teams to ensure cleanliness in and around the location, and there will be regular checks of all units by staff. Residents will sign program agreements and will pay a rate set by the province. Unlike shelters, which are free, temporary housing is considered a mode of supportive housing. The staff will be trained in nonviolent crisis intervention, overdose and incident response, provide peer support, and connect residents with local resources while providing trauma-informed communications. So this is just one step that we're taking as part of the holistic approach. The city will continue to work with neighbors to complete cleanups, and we'll see continued increase of RCMP and bylaw presence where possible. The city did hire 4 new additional RCMP positions this year, as well as 2 new bylaw positions, as well as a bylaw manager position, which were all approved this year in our financial plan. The city is also leading a community safety and well-being plan, which will be informed by extensive engagement with the community and set clear goals and actions to support community safety going forward. So some of the intended objectives is to decrease time spent outdoors or in shelters, increase the number of people finding permanent homes, decrease the number of people returning to shelter or encampments, and support the city's other objectives related to community safety.
Thanks very much, Elle, and thanks to all of our speakers. We are now moving to the discussion portion of today's agenda, and with that, I will conclude the recording.